lovers and cheaters who have never been caught. Making love with Carrie had always been great, but tonight may have been the best, as she never seemed to come away from the pleasure. When we came to our senses, our smiling lips dug into each other again and again. At the time of the above love escapade, Carrie and I were married, just not to each other. I know I'm a cheating asshole, lower than pond scum on the evolutionary scale, but when I'm around Carrie, I'm happier than I've ever been in my life, so I don't care about my status on the evolutionary scale. A rational person might ask, if you two were so happy with each other, why didn't you divorce your spouses and marry each other? This is usually a fair question, but not in our case. We both had a comfortable life in the suburbs with jobs that were enjoyable but not demanding. Our spouses made more money than we did. Our position in our generally conservative society would have suffered greatly, which would have likely necessitated a move. And our spouses had a very vindictive streak they exhibited in business and social situations that made us hesitant to do anything that would incur their wrath. Plus, we had been having sex for 5 months now, averaging 3 times a week, which had caused our libidos to reach epic proportions, so our sex life with our spouses had really improved, both in terms of frequency and pleasure. Won't your spouses eventually find out about this, you ask, since spouses always seem to discover the affair eventually. Is it true that cheaters never win, you ask? Perhaps, but in our case, the likelihood was so slim that it was worth the risk. We knew what we were getting into, and I'll tell you why. Carrie and I met 8 years ago, before we were married, when we were each 2 or 3 years out of college. We were working part-time for the same company as relationship testers in New York City. What's a relationship tester, you ask? A fair question, since it's either an unusual profession or an occupation for which you get paid depending on the individual. A relationship tester is hired by a client of the opposite sex to see if his or her spouse, lover, or even potential lover has a wandering eye. That is, to see if he or she is trustworthy. When you work as a relationship tester, you are always paired with a subject who has roughly the same level of physical attractiveness as you. Otherwise, it would not be fair. For example, it's unlikely that someone who looks like Kate Upton or Kelly Pickler would be matched with a scruffy 5'2", 60-pound nerd, which would be realistic or fair. The prime directive for relationship testers is that you should never, ever have sex with an object. If the subject proves to be unreliable, you take them to the point where they take off their clothes and then terminate the relationship. If you go any further, you will be fired, you could be sued, and there is even a remote possibility that you will be arrested. Although Carrie and I had met since we were only working part-time as relationship testers, we didn't get to know each other well until we had both been working at the testing company for about 6 months. We came into the office on Saturday morning to prepare reports for clients and edit the audio and video recordings that were part of our information gathering for work on Friday night. We were both frustrated, as our targets were a very attractive and bad boy and girl, respectively, but as required, we didn't get to have sex. As Carrie and I talked, we started flirting. We really started to like each other. I think she was the first to notice, though I certainly thought about it, that we really did look a lot alike. We were both tall, medium build, with blonde hair, blue eyes, and identical noses. I told her that I thought she was a more attractive female version of me. She laughed it off. When we came into the office again on Sunday morning, we were just as frustrated with the other 2 sexual marks that were bad after our Saturday work as we had been on Saturday morning. Before our reports were finished, I kissed Carrie passionately, and then we made love. We were both a bit cynical about relationships at the time, so we didn't get romantically involved with each other. But we did have sex 2 more times. It was the best sex of my life, and if Carrie wasn't a great actress, it was the same or close to it for her. Not a week after our 3rd sex, Carrie had to quit both part-time jobs and move back to her hometown to care for her mother, who had been in a serious car accident and had no one else to turn to. About 2 weeks later, I met my future wife, Julie. Julie was the designated target on a Saturday night. She had money, as did her fiancé. Julie proved to be reliable, although it was obvious she liked me and we hit it off. I filed a report with audio and video, indicating that she was in the highest category of trustworthiness and thought nothing more of it. Another 3 weeks or so after Julie became my target, she screwed up one of my assignments by intercepting me before I could approach my target on Friday night. "Hi, Blake, if that's your real name. Remember me?" she said with a glass in her hand, a sexy expression on her face, and provocative clothing and accessories. "Oh, hi, Julie," I replied. I tried to cut the conversation short, but she didn't succeed. Finally, I said, "Look, I came here to meet someone, so if you'll excuse me." She didn't let me finish. "I'm not sure if your job is going to work today, Blake, because as soon as you start talking to her, I'm going to tell her you're a relationship tester," Julie said quietly, with a wide grin on her face. There was no use in denying it. The look on my face certainly said it. "Please don't," I begged. "Let's you and I talk a little, dance a couple times, and then I'll probably let you get to work," she replied with a smirk. It turned out that her dim-witted fiancé had told her about the testing, something we warn our clients never to do. She got really pissed off. According to her, she was already getting nervous about marrying him because although he was cute and nice, he turned out to be shallow and not too smart, as evidenced by the testing story. Anyway, she had left him the day before and came looking for me. I made it easy for her to find me, as I was at the same bar dance hall where I had met her 3 weeks earlier. After a long conversation, a few drinks and dancing, we ended up having sex in her apartment that same night and spent the entire weekend together. While she didn't look like Carrie, she was well above average. The next week, I quit my job as a relationship tester. A month later, she got a promotion that forced her to move to X city, and she asked me if I wanted to go with her. I didn't like my other part-time job. City X had good prospects for what I wanted to do full-time, and I really liked Julie, so I followed her. We lived together in City X for 9 months before we got married. Julie and I had been married for about 6 years, when about a year before the events described in the first 2 paragraphs above, I saw Carrie at a party. We were shocked that we had met again in a different city than our hometown, and that we were now both married. She had been married for about 5 years to a guy named Brent Spencer. Neither of us had children. After a private conversation, Carrie and I decided not to tell anyone we knew each other and exchanged cell phone numbers. Except for one lunch meeting and 5 or 6 cell phone conversations, for the next 6 months, Carrie and I did not speak to each other. Meanwhile, Julie began traveling more for work, leaving me more time to think, and I used that time to think about Carrie. One lonely Thursday evening, when Julie wasn't due back until Friday night, I had a strong urge to call Carrie. I'd never called her at night before, but here I couldn't resist. "Hi, Carrie, it's Blake." "Hi, Blake. What a nice surprise." "We haven't talked in a while. I was just thinking about you and thought I'd see what you've been up to." "Is this a bad time?" I asked. "No, actually, I was thinking about you too. Brent is out of town." "Ha, coincidence, Julie too," I replied, perhaps more enthusiastically than I should have. After what seemed to me to be a long pause, Carrie said, "Why don't you come over to my place for a drink? I have to get up early, but if you don't mind leaving by 11 or so, it would be great to catch up." "Great. I'll call Julie and talk to her for a bit, and then I'll come over. What's your address?" About 45 minutes later, I pulled up to Carrie's mini-mansion. When she opened the door in a provocative outfit, I realized that our casual relationship was over. She said, "Hi, Blake. Good to see you," in a sultry voice. Those were the last words, if you don't count the screaming, we uttered for the next 40 minutes. I grabbed Carrie by the top of her head, pulled her to me, pressed my lips to hers, and then ripped our clothes off. We had barely made it to the couch before I was already having sex with her. Afterward, we lay there panting and giggling. "You're the best lover ever." Of course I spent the night. We had sex 2 more times, each one better than the last. When we were hurriedly getting ready for work the next day, Carrie said frankly. It seems neither of us has the brains or willpower to stop loving each other. So I suggest we get together and discuss how to make sure we never get caught. It would really, really spoil my life. Mine too, Carrie, but I agree. There's no way I'm giving up sex with you, I replied, taking her into my arms. After a passionate kiss, as she walked out the front door and I out the back door, she said, "Call me Sunday morning to make an appointment. Have a list ready of everything we need to do so we don't get caught." We had a great excuse to meet on Sunday afternoon. Our work as relationship testers, as well as the experience we had gained at our jobs at the time, made us well-versed in the potential pitfalls. I worked in the computer department of a state office providing counseling services, marriage, emotional, education, and substance abuse, and Carrie ran the main office for school counselors in the largest local school system. Although neither of us worked as a counselor per se, we were in regular contact with them and knew most of the pitfalls of the relationship. We were in complete agreement on how to proceed. No contact other than voice communication using phones with no call memory and speed dialing. No public displays of affection. No use of credit cards when we're together, and no changes in any type of behavior toward or around spouses. The last condition was the most important and the most difficult, but we were confident that we could fulfill it given our experience as relationship testers. It happened on a Wednesday evening in one of the many guest rooms in the mini-mansion in which I lived, funded by Julie's wealth and large salary rather than my modest paycheck. Both spouses were out of town. When we were fully recovered, we had a heart-to-heart talk. "Carrie, I am so blinded by my passion for you that I think I may be unknowingly giving Julie a vibe that makes her suspicious. Although we've mostly followed our rules to avoid detection, I think we need a catastrophic trust event." "What does that mean, Sherlock?" She grinned. "It means we have to make our spouses suspect us, specifically, and then prove that those suspicions are unfounded. Deeply Gandhi, or should I say Freud? Very deep," she replied cheerfully. I pinched her breast lightly. "Listen up or I'll never have sex with you again," I declared incredulously. When her laughter subsided, I told her my plan. Carrie and I had put bugs in our spouses' cell phones to see if they had any particular suspicions. Even though we were cheaters, we didn't really want to invade their privacy, so the bugs communicated with a computer in my office that had software installed that would only select portions of conversations that contained keywords or phrases such as affair, cheating, suspicious, etc. You got it. Basically, you got it. Although we could listen to the entire conversation if key words or phrases were used, we usually only listened to a few important seconds. We also constantly mentioned each other to our spouses, even showing them pictures and asking them if they remembered meeting us. When our spouses called from out of town, we didn't answer right away. Of course, sometimes this was because we were actually having sex until we passed out, and if we did, we answered out of breath. We would fictitiously take time off from work, asking the secretaries in the office to say we were out for a minute when our spouses called. We called each other on regular cell phones several times a day and hid our hot phones in our offices. It didn't take long. In less than a month, Brent and Julie contacted each other and began speculating about whether or not we were having an affair, and then jointly contracted a private investigator. It was exactly what we wanted. I already had an electronic equipment detector at work. It could look for bugs, but I didn't want to take any chances and bought state-of-the-art equipment capable of detecting any electronic equipment. From the phone records we monitored, we concluded that while Carrie and I were at work, our homes and cars were equipped with video and/or audio equipment, and we left our regular cell phones at home to be bugged. Just a few days after we suspected that electronic equipment had been installed in our homes, our spouses went out of town, on legitimate business, but clearly for the purpose of checking up on us. I surreptitiously scoured both our homes and cars and used small, thin stickers that could only be seen with infrared to determine where all the cameras and recording devices were located. Our cell phones, home phones, and cars were clearly tapped, and each of our homes had 5 cameras. While our spouses were away, we would call each other, make plans to go out to dinner or to various cultural events, and end up at one house or the other for drinks. From time to time, we would talk about our spouses in enthusiastic tones, telling them how much we missed them, but adding just enough criticism or good-natured teasing to make the conversation realistic. When we went to each other's homes, we would read, play cards or board games, or watch DVD movies while sitting next to each other, occasionally exchanging caresses, but with absolutely no sexual overtones. When saying goodbye, we kissed each other lightly on the lips. 2 weeks later, our spouses had to go out of town again, and we repeated our performances for the cameras and audio recording. The theatrics forced us to cut back on the number of lovemaking sessions but didn't negate them. Both weeks while they were gone, we had sex in our garages, driving our cars a short distance away, and when the one driving to his house came back with a package from some store, which we made sure to capture with the camera to make it look like we stopped by on the way home to buy something. On the last day of Julie and Brent's second week of absence, I gave Carrie a quick peck on the cheek goodbye in full view of the camera in the living room, where her microphone was clearly picking up our words, and she said, "Blake, do you think we should tell Brent and Julie our secret? I don't like hiding anything from our spouses." After pausing for dramatic effect, I replied, "Let's approach this question from a different angle. I don't really want to tell them, but I don't want to lie either. If any of them ask us what's going on with us, we'll answer honestly. And if they don't ask, we won't tell them." "You're a lot smarter than you look," Carrie giggled, and then gave me a quick peck on the lips before I walked out. Wow. Julie and Brent were predictably curious. They both mysteriously disappeared for part of the day on Saturday after returning Friday night, and on Sunday morning, after Julie and I had made love very pleasantly. She asked me something that I'm sure was burning her from the inside out. "Blake, I need to get an honest answer from you about something." "Sure, Julie, about anything," I replied, stroking her breasts. "Are you and Carrie Spencer having an affair?" I paused dramatically, then smiled softly and said, "I guess I understand how you asked that question, because I do talk to and about her a lot, and we often meet up when you and her husband are out of town. But no, you don't." "So what do you two have in common?" she asked with genuine bewilderment. "Wow!" exclaimed I, and after another pause I said, "Julie, if I answer your question, you have to promise never to tell me anything ever again. Promise?" I asked, holding her by both hands. "Why a secret?" she asked. "You have to promise or I just won't tell you and I'll have to let you think whatever you want," I replied dejectedly. "I promise," she replied, looking into my eyes. "A few months ago, we found out quite by accident that we are half-siblings. We have the same father and a different mother. Do you realize how much pain that would have caused our mothers if it had been made public?" Julie awed and was at a loss for words. "It can't be," was all this high-ranking corporate executive could say. "Have you ever noticed how alike we are?" I asked. "Yes, it's really obvious," she said with realization in her eyes. "And how did you discover that?" Another histrionic pause in the conversation on your part. Then I said in the most serious voice I was capable of, "I'm sorry, but I don't want to talk about that now, nor anything else. I have answered your question honestly, and that is all I am willing to share at this time. There are other people involved here." I finished by gently stroking her face a few times and then said, "Please understand me." She nodded in agreement, tears in her eyes. I then pounced on her and made love to her. Apparently, later that day, Julie called Brent to tell him what she had learned. From their conversation, which I listened to in full, It was clear that they both bought into the half-brother and half-sister story. Oh, and how could it be otherwise when they had audio and videotapes of our affectionate but innocent hours of taping, and given our similar appearance? I called Carrie that day to let her know that Julie had asked me about it, and as per our agreement, I told her the truth. I asked her if Brent had asked about her relationship with me, and she said, "No, but of course if he asks, I'll tell him." That evening, Brent did ask Carrie, as he had promised in his phone conversation with Julie, just so he could feign surprise and say that Carrie had told him, not Julie. 2 business days later, all electronic equipment was gone from both of our homes, cars, and cell phones. Carrie and I had a grand holiday sex party and then went back to our usual 3 times a week. The only change we made after the trust event was to make harmless daily calls to each other on regular cell phones so that when we checked our records, it would appear that we were still talking to each other. We also met with our spouses about once a month at their suggestion. During these meetings, we were affectionate but not sexual. The next 2 years were amazing. Both Carrie and I were more sexually and emotionally fulfilled than we had ever been in our lives, more than we had ever expected or had a right to expect. However, several things changed during those 2 years. First, I had to admit that I had fallen in love with Carrie, and we verbally expressed our love for each other every time we met. Second, Carrie really wanted to have at least 1 child, and I wanted more than one. Third, Brent turned out to be infertile, and it was unlikely he would ever be a biological father. Fourth, although Julie was open-minded when we discussed it before we got married and for the first couple years of our marriage, she has now made it clear that her career is too important to her, and she no longer wants children. Fifth, while we both still liked and in some ways loved our spouses, we had to admit that we were not in love with them, and their affection for us seemed to have diminished, although neither Brent nor Julie seemed unhappy with the status quo. Carrie and I came up with another plan. She would have Brent go with her and select a donor with physical characteristics most similar to mine. She wouldn't complete the procedure, but she and I would have sex as often as possible while she was off the pill and in her most fertile period of the month so she could carry our baby. We were proud of ourselves. We were lovers and cheaters who never got caught and had our needs fully met. Apparently, spouses don't always recognize this. Epilogue. Unfortunately, things didn't work out as planned. Although Carrie quickly became pregnant, Brent found out that due to a mistake, she hadn't been artificially inseminated. He had the DNA of the intrauterine baby analyzed. Before the results came back, Carrie and I withdrew all the money that really belonged to us, packed up our most expensive belongings, and shipped them off to another city. Sure, we weren't being fair to our spouses, but we at least gave them a sign by meeting with them in person to tell them that we were not related to each other and were leaving them to leave together, and that we would sign any divorce papers they offered unless the terms were completely outrageous. We didn't want their money. Obviously, these meetings did not go smoothly, nor did our refusal to let them know where we were going. We simply left contact information through a lawyer. Both Carrie and I felt like garbage until the baby was born. We are now divorced from Julie and Brent, living modestly, married to each other, expecting our second child soon and truly happy and fulfilled. I guess sometimes the cheaters do win, even if it is at the expense of others. The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.